Very good, Jay. All right, Jay, is it okay if I take this out of your pocket?
Sure.
Can I take that out there?
Yeah.
Okay. There you go. Perfect.
Now, wait a minute. What did you say your name was again?
Heather. Heather. Just
Okay,
think about
Heather.
Just think about feather, like a feather.
Oh, Heather, yeah, all right.
I have a twin sister, and that's how people remember us. My hair's more feathery and Holly's is
Okay,
long.
Heather.
But if that helps you at all. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, thank you. Okay. All right, Jay.
Mm-hmm.
All right, Jay, can you tell me your full name?
Well, yeah, you have to have my middle name.
Well, you don't have to.
Well, my middle name is Edwin. And the last name is Kramer with a K. K-R-A-M-E-R, Kramer, yes.
What branch in the military did you serve?
Well, I wound up in the Air Force, Army Air Force. It was called that before it came officially Air Force in 47. So,
What division did you serve in the Army?
well, in the Army, I took the basic, in just regular basic, you know, and then when I got overseas, became in the quartermasters for just a few weeks, and then transferred to the Air Force. They was picking up many people as they could. For all the little GIs were getting out by their numbers, by their length of duty. So they just went around and got people to transfer to different parts of the service, and one of mine was picked to go to the Air Force. That's how I wound up in the Air Force. So it was in the communications part of the Air Force. And I went to school for about, 3 months. It was a crash course in Morse code. If you could learn Morse code in 3 months, you're doing pretty good. And I never got real adept at it, but when I was stationed in Tokyo, that was my job, was to get in contact with airplanes that was flying in from Okinawa, and I had to get sent weather reports and landing instructions to the airplanes that came in. That was the group that I was in duty. That's what we had to do. And I was, like I say, a lot of it was by Morse code. And if you ever had to do anything in Morse code, it was pretty hard to learn in 3 months' time. Some of them guys could talk Morse code just as easy as they could natural language, but you had to do it for a long while before you could get that good at it. And I never got that good at it, because then by the time I served a while then before I was discharged. So it was interesting work, but I'm sure some of the guys that I talked to that was flying in from Okinawa was probably like to see a more qualified person to talk to, because I was not very good at the Morse code. You just don't learn that in 3 months' time. We had the crash course while I was in Tokyo, and you don't learn that quick, Morse code that quick. So, but I did as best I could. And that's it.
So what was your job in the service? Just doing Morse code?
Well, just doing this, what I just said, sending. We were stationed right in Tokyo, and we just planes that was flying in from Okinawa to Tokyo. Haneda Air Force Base in Tokyo, and we just sent. We was told what to tell them to get with the weather reports, whatever the weather was in Tokyo, and then landing instructions, whatever. If you had somebody on board, or they had somebody on board, it was a VIP or something, we had to get make arrangements for transportation after they got into the airbase to wherever they was going. That's what we did. Yeah.
Stepping back a little bit, how did you get entered into the service?
And into it, well, I was I was a farmer, and most of my friends there was all farmers, and when we registered for the draft, then we got exempted for a few times because farmers was pretty important to the world. I mean, to the Air Force. I mean, to the services, as far as food was concerned. So that's why I was deferred for 6 months, and then I would have kept on getting deferred. But my friend's best friend, he went to the service, and I just didn't like. I just wanted to go myself. So I didn't. I turned down all chances for deferment, and I told draft me. So I did. I went to service then, but I was not quite. I was 19 when I went to service, and I taught basic training in Texas, Camp Texas, and then after I got through basic, immediately we sent to California. We was stationed in Fort Ord, California for this short period of time, then went overseas and landed in Yokohama in Japan, and took train up to where we was stationed in Tokyo. And then I was in Tokyo in the quartermasters for several months. Then I was promoted to. When you first got overseas, every GI was promoted from private to PFC, and then when I said PFC, I was promoted to sergeant, and that was when I was in the quartermaster, and then I went from there into the Air Force, and from there, that's where I stayed from there on until I was discharged. The schooling was right in Tokyo. It was just picked as so many that they thought we would be adapted to learning Morse code quick. Well, we've done our best, but like I say, it was awful hard to learn Morse code and do that, what we had to do in a short period of time. But they needed people for the guys that had been in for a long period of time, seen a lot of action, and was ready for discharge. So that's what we took their place. And that's why we was not exactly adapted to being real good at that kind of stuff. But that was my duties all the time I was in the Air Force until I was discharged myself.
Were you involved in any invasions, even though you were on the side of the radio?
On what?
Were you involved in any invasions, even though it was like more on the side of the radio?
Division?
Invasions.
Oh, no. That was all over with. When I was in basic, they dropped the bombs. and that was what ended everything. You know, that was the one thing that we was all probably destined to go for the invasion of Japan itself. But then Japan surrendered after they dropped the bombs. That was a questionable thing. A lot of people later on had questions about, you know, the bombs killed an awful lot of civilians, but it saved the life of an awful lot of GIs too. Because if we'd had to invade Japan, it would have been a long, long, drawn-out thing. Because Japanese were good at living underground. And that was evidenced in Okinawa, where everything was in caves. There was an awful lot of GIs. They had to just dig them out of the caves, and there was an awful lot of casualties in Okinawa. If you read on Okinawa, there was a lot of GIs got killed in Okinawa, getting the Japanese out of there. That's why when they got ready to invade Japan, it took an awful lot of troops to do it, because Japan was probably mostly caves. I mean, they was prepared for an invasion. And then that's why Truman decided to drop the bombs, and that ended it. And that was it. There was a lot, like I say, there was a lot of civilians killed in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. That's where the 2 bombs was dropped, and it killed an awful lot of civilians. But the bombs was pretty well wiped out everything for quite a large area. The atomic bombs was just, everything was disintegrated. The only thing was left, we traveled along from when we landed in Yokohama and went by train up to Tokyo, and you could see the destruction from the atomic bombs when we traveled up there. You never got near the center of where the bombs was dropped, because there was still radioactivity, from atomic bombs. That was what killed so many people, was the actual radioactivity. And when you could see the only thing left was Japan had an awful lot of concrete smokestacks. And they must have burned a lot of coal in Japan, evidently, because the only thing left standing was them concrete smokestacks. It didn't destroy them, that bomb, but it wiped out everything else. There was nothing left, absolutely nothing. And of course, like I say, a lot of civilians got killed, and that's where there was a lot of people. I suppose some of them thought that was against inhuman, but it saved the life of an awful lot of GIs, because it would have been to invade Japan would have been an awful hard thing to do. So that was why I think most GIs thought it was a thing to do. And most everybody that I ever talked to that was involved in the service agreed that it was a thing to do, to drop the bombs. That was, like I say, an awful lot of deaths caused by the 2 atomic bombs. But it was a necessary thing.
Where were you on VJ Day, on Victory
I had just completed my basic training. We was just completed basic training, and at VJ Day, because there was there was a lot of celebration, but then being in basic training, you never got in on much of the celebration because it was still it was out down in Camp Fadden, Texas, and if these old temporary places for training, there's none of them are left now. Camp Fadden, I'm sure, is gone. It was a little ways from Tyler, Texas. I don't know if you ever heard of Tyler, Texas. It was east of, I think it was east of Dallas. Anyway, that was where was when VJ Day, and then we got sent home for a short period of time. Everybody did after they got a basic before we sent overseas. I went from out to Fort Ord, California for a short period of time, and where they got formed enough to fill a ship to send overseas. We went over on what they called a general ship, which is the name of ours was General Weigel, W-E-I-G-E-L, and that was all them ships was named after generals, and it held 5,000 troops, and we went over, left San Francisco in October, I think about October the 5th. I got to Japan in about the 20th. It's about I think it was a 13-day trip overseas. That's how long it took to get from San Francisco to Yokohama, Japan. And it was mostly very stormy. We went, and I was extremely seasick, as was a lot of people. I was not a Navy person, and when you up in them ships, and there's a lot of storms. They said the waves was 40 feet high wave. If you was ever on a big ship, and when it went up on a wave, and the props came out of the water, and then when they come back down in the water, the ship would shudder, and that made everybody not more sick. Your seasickness was very. That was a miserable thing. I never want to be. I wasn't like a very good sailor. So that was my experience as far as getting overseas. Is in October, and then from then on it was going up to Tokyo and being in the quartermaster for a short period of time, and then into the Air Force.
So you got drafted when you were 19. So
Yes.
tell me about when you heard about Pearl Harbor, because you would have been at home.
Oh, Pearl Harbor?
Yeah.
Well, I was a senior in high school at Pearl Harbor. Yes. We all heard that, listened to that on the radio, when Pearl Harbor happened. And it was quite the people was all quite upset over that, because Pearl Harbor was it changed the whole nation, because we went from this civilian life to wartime, and the United States done an awful good job of doing that. The people really took hold and adapted to warfare. And you know, everything had to be rationed, and everything back then in the 40s, we all went. Everything was rationed. You got just so much gas to drive, and all that was, and tires. You had, as far as getting tires, was next to impossible. So a lot of people drove around on tires that was next to nothing, but you had to get by because everything was went to the military, and that was the way everybody accepted that and pitched in. And the United States really, that's how they won the war, by doing that. I mean, it made everybody mad. Pearl Harbor did. You know, that was a sneak attack and all that by the Japanese. And I think the United States, the people really, everybody got upset. I mean, the United States really got mad, and that's how we defeated, as far as that goes, was determined. And of course, immediately, a lot of people, younger guys, about 18 and them, all volunteered. Well, and of course, there was a draft immediately. But I finished high school, and then, like I say, I was 16 when I was a senior. So as soon as we registered for the draft, and then all of us, it was most everybody around where I lived was farmers. We was all farmers. And these farmers, most of them was, if you farmed a lot of ground, he was a lot of guys got exempted for a while, but even though we was exempted, you just felt like you shouldn't be there. You should be helping to win. So that's why most of us just wouldn't turn down an exemption. And when you turned it down, you was drafted. You just didn't feel right to be in home when all your friends went, and that's why I could probably never went, but I didn't feel right at all about it. And I had a brother who was in the service. My best friend, when he went, that's what I did, turned down acceptance. My best friend was, he had 4 brothers that was in the service, and one of them, the youngest one enlisted in the Navy. The oldest one was killed at Normandy, and then he had another one that was in the service. And then when he was a foreman, and then when he went, I said, that's when I went. You just didn't feel right. So that's how I got into service. When I was still 19, yeah.
Did your brother and your best friend both make it back?
Pardon?
Both your brother and your best friend, did they make it back after the war?
Oh yes, my brother was. He was in the Air Force too, and he was an instructor in helping the other guys in the flying air learning. He was a bombardier. Not a bombardier. He was, I think bombardiers were all officers, but he was this on the B-17s. Everybody was there was about, I think, 8 on total as far as manning machine guns and everything on B-17s. And that's what he was an instructor in that. And that's where he stayed. And he never did go overseas. And then my best friend went, he was in the infantry. He wound up going over just at the end of the war in Europe, and he was in Germany for a while. But I could say, then everybody was drafted when I went to the Pacific Theater. That's why, because they figured the war ended in Europe, and they figured I was going to need to invade Japan, but then, like I say, the bombs ended that. That's just about how I went, my life history as far as military, yeah.
What were some memorable experiences in World War II in the short amount of time that you were there?
You mean experiences as far as what?
While you were in, as a radio operator.
Oh, well, it's that's the way, we was in a room in Tokyo. You'd never seen an airplane. I never seen an airplane. But we just knew what the weather was. That's what we said. We contacted the planes that was flying in from Okinawa. And as far as being, I never got off the ground myself. I was just stationed there in Tokyo, and we was told what to do, and we just sent it to the airplanes where they flew it. That was just what it amounted to. There was nothing exciting about as far as that goes. It was just a job to do. Yeah.
So one of the things with Memoirs of World War II is we want to preserve this history and also educate the younger generation. Is there anything that you could say to the younger generation?
Oh.
Like lessons to pass on with all the knowledge that you've gathered.
Well, there's so much difference between the now and then. I can't get used to some of the things that goes on nowadays. I mean, as far as communications, just all this buttons and everything, you use now, I don't do that. And I know it's what's happening now, and that's the way the life is. But the life nowadays is so much faster than what in mine. And I'm kind of saying I do not care for the way things are nowadays. I'm not up to that stuff. As far as the younger generation now, I know they have to go with what is going on now as far as education and what you're going to wind up being. I think a lot of the younger boys would benefit greatly by going into service. I think what they learn in the military is very much better than what you see a lot of in civilian life. It's altogether different. You learn how to take orders, and you learn how to do what you're told. And that is something that I don't see too much of nowadays, as far as I'm concerned. I think that's why I say these young boys would benefit greatly by going in the military. I a lot of them probably think, gosh darn, I don't want to go in there and have people tell me what to do. But it's something that is worth a lot when you get older. And learn to take orders and to do what you're told to do if it comes to that. So I'm all for going into the military. When you think about having to do it, its basic training is no fun. Anybody that goes will tell you that. You do a lot of exercises that most of us probably ain't used to doing. That's the first thing you learn, is to get up early in the morning and probably do calisthenics, which is a lot of younger generation probably have never done. It's just that a lot of all the young kids that I know of are quite absorbed in looking at that little machine that shows pictures. Now that, to me, that is the, as far as I would take one and I'd throw it in the river. I know it's a necessary thing. You got to do it, but I see so many young kids that that's all they do is stand there looking at that little machine and push the buttons and look at it. To me, it's a complete waste. I don't know whether you agree with all that, but anyway, that's the way I feel about it. I like to see all my grandkids. I had a lot of and great grandkids, but every one of them, I can see them sitting there staring at that thing, and it drives me nuts. But I know that's what they do. But that's just the way I feel about it.
No, that's good. I mean, you're basically saying that the younger generation.
What?
You're basically saying that the younger generation needs, to be able to put themselves in situations that help discipline themselves, and not just be comfortable all the time, but help themselves grow.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I agree with you.
Well, I didn't know whether you agreed with me or not.
I just don't want to.
But I just want you to know that is my opinion of that stuff.
Yeah, do you want to ask about what it was like being an occupying force in Japan?
Okay. What did you feel about being an occupying force in Japan?
What about it?
How do you feel like the people felt about you being?
Well, the Japanese people, their way of living is a lot different than ours, and you gotta. When we got over there, and you'd go to. When you see communal bathrooms, it's all hard to get used to. You go into one of the communal baths where there was, it's not nice, but there would be a trough right down the room with water running through it, and the people, men, women, they all use it. And you could see them, they squat down over that trough, and that's how they, and that was probably not all, I think the upper class didn't do that, but the ordinary people, that's how they did that. They went to the bathroom, it was communal, there was no men and women. They all went to the same place. That was kind of hard to get used to. But there's a lot of Japanese, you heard about the geisha. Geisha. Well, the geisha women was they dressed very elegantly, and they all had their robes, and they were, you think about geishas, you might think of them as ladies of the street or prostitutes, whatever you want to call it. But they were not. They were just more like waitresses, or the upper class men, the businessmen. I seen it when we were stationed in it was originally a barracks for Japanese, and that's where we would occupied. That's where we slept and ate and everything. And there would be Japanese businesses, maybe right close, and you could observe them when they would the way they lived, as and the businessmen would be sitting in there, and nobody sat in chairs. They all sat down on a little mat. That's the way the Japanese did mostly with like this, and I observed them many times across from where we was at, and the men would be waited on by these geisha women, and the geisha women all wear makeup that's it's white, what you ladies call powder. They made them, and they would wear their hair up in buns up on top, and they had a big pad of clothing on their back, and they wore the kimonos. They call them very elegant, and very colorful. And you'd see them over there when they was having lunch or whatever. And that was what I'd call the more classy part of Japan. But the other part is just like it is, I suppose. There's a kind of a, what do you call it? The upper class and lower class. And the lower class would, you'd see them on the streets, and where they ate was, it was an awful lot of fish. The Japanese had a lot of fish and a lot of rice. And that's two things that I didn't really care for at all myself. For fish and rice. They call it bento. And that was, and usually them Japanese would carry a little tin, it's about like a sardine can. And that's what if you ever seen one, we had to examine them sometimes when we did do guard duty, and there would be usually a bunch of rice and fish in that combined. And it didn't appeal to me at all, but that's what they ate, a lot of them. And you could, a lot of these places where the Japanese people had where they bought groceries, where they got it'd be a poultry and fish hanging out there in the open, and how it kept from spoiling, I do not know. Maybe they sold it as fast. Maybe it was fresh, I do not know. Of course, it didn't smell good at all to me. That was the worst thing I thought about the Japan in Tokyo was the odor was not. It smelled like fish mostly. if you smell raw fish, you don't. I never did appeal to me at all. Even less after I was there.
How did the local people react to you being there?
Oh well, they just kind of more or less ignored us. That was where we ate, where the GIs, we'd have our places where we ate, and whenever you come out, got done eating, there would always be a line of kids with their tray asking for food, and they always had two words, you and bento. And you was me, and bento was, they wanted your, whatever food you had left. And they had their little trays or whatever, and if you wanted to give it to them, and a lot of GIs did, instead of dumping our food into the garbage bin, we dump it. They'd be standing there holding them things out like that, and you just dump it into their trays. And I presume that these kids, their parents probably sent them. That would be my guess. And these kids would take that food and probably take it home. I do not know this, but that would be my guess, because that's all these kids would be, a bunch of them lying up there, and that's what they always say, you, bento. Bento was, they wanted your food, bento. And that's what they would do. And most of the GIs most GIs had a good heart toward kids. We all did. You never felt like a kid was an enemy, like an adult. That's just the way you felt. You just had a soft heart for kids. I know many GIs that did. I think you'd find that they all had soft heart for kids. That was about the way, as far as the civilian life, and as far as when we was stationed in Japan. Before I got into the Air Force, they had USO was the main place for the GIs to get for entertainment. The USO was very good about putting on shows. There was a big theater right there in Tokyo. It was called the Ernie Pyle Theater. Ernie Pyle, was a man who was pretty well known in the United States Army. He was a correspondent, and I think he was killed in action. He killed somewhere in the war. Ernie Pyle, he was very well known correspondent. And that big theater was, I suppose the Japanese had used it for the same purpose. And it was the USO put a lot of shows on it, and we went, you could attend them, and it was a very nice place and a big place. And the USO was the main thing for all soldiers, whether he was overseas. They always had what they call them canteens, and you could get coffee and donuts. Always had a USO. And then USO, wherever there was troops, there was the USO. And that's where an awful lot of entertainers, name guys that entertain would be with the USO. And they put on some awful nice shows. And that would be the main source of entertainment as far as going to anything that was put on for the troops. As far as, the main thing I got to see when I was in Japan was there's different divisions had football teams. That was my main thing when I was in high school, playing football. And there was, they put on football games right there in the stadium in Tokyo. And we went to football games, and then the Japanese had of course there was, the Japanese had an emperor, and the emperor's palace was right in the middle of Tokyo, and something was noticeable. All around that, the bombing was Tokyo was badly destroyed by bombing. Before they dropped the bomb, there was a constant bombing of Tokyo, all of Japan, as far as they go. And there's an awful lot of already destruction in Tokyo. The main railroad station was all burnt out. And then it was only a few blocks from the emperor's palace, which was shrouded by a moat. And that it was the amazing thing about that was it was not bombed at all. There was nothing done to the emperor's palace. I don't know if that was intentional. I mean, they knew a lot about it, where everything was at as far as bombing is concerned. They tried to bomb industrial areas where the manufacturing park. That's where the main thing was bombing. But the emperor's palace was not bothered at all. And whether that was intentional, I do not know. And it was a pretty good sized thing, and it was quite beautiful. Trees, water all around, the boat. And the emperor had I don't know if he had it, but it was called the emperor's. They had a white stallion that when they put on an entertainment at these football games, it was part of they probably put a show more or less on for the troops, but it was Japanese. The emperor's was supposed to be his stallion, but I'm quite sure he never rode it. But it was a beautiful horse, and it was that was one thing I may remember quite often about. a lot about as far as entertainment was going to these football games between different divisions. One was come up from Okinawa and played football there at the stadium in Tokyo. I think that probably I only got to do that about once, as far as that is concerned, because things move fast. Then we didn't stay in one spot very darn long. When I went to the Air Force, I went down way south of Tokyo to a little airfield where we were supposed to help dismantle Japanese aircraft. Well, we did that, and what they do is dismantle it and throw it in the ocean. That's how they got rid of it, and we was there when we got acquainted with a lot of these guys that done a lot of flying in the actual combat, these flyboys, as we call them, were a kind of a different breed of people. Them guys, they were just, they did not believe in, you saluted them because they was always an officer. Anybody that flew airplane was, of course, an officer. And if you saluted him, yeah, this is a waste of time. They didn't believe it. They didn't have that kind of stuff. It just, they were really a very nice guys to talk to. You know, they've been through a lot, but they were very easy to talk to and very common. Even though I know they'd all seen a lot. That was the most interesting thing about talking to the guys. But we was only stationed a little while down there doing that, and then back to Tokyo. That was after I was promoted to sergeant. Then that's when I started back to the schooling, as learning how to do Morse code after I got transferred to the Air Force, and that just about ended it.
Do you have any questions about was there anything that you missed or anything to add? Katie, do you have anything? No? Okay. All right, awesome. We do have some questions about Eisenhower, or do you want to ask them this?
Yeah.
Okay.
So you served in the Pacific, so I'm sure you didn't. Did you ever have any encounters with Eisenhower, or do you know anybody who did?
And what?
With General Eisenhower.
General Eisenhower. No, you know, General Eisenhower, he was in the Pacific, the European theater operation. And you know, I seen General MacArthur once in Tokyo when he come out of his headquarters there in Tokyo. You know, MacArthur was you could always recognize him because he always had a pipe in his mouth. But that was the only time I ever seen anybody. And of course, as far as Ike was concerned, no, I never had. The only time I ever seen him was when in Abilene itself. When I seen him when he was standing on that balcony at the Sunflower Theater. You know, when they had when he was first running for president or whatever. That was the only time I ever seen Ike.
Did you have any thoughts about him, you know, as a person?
Ike?
Yeah.
Well, no, you know, because I never, as far as in service concerned, like I say, the theater of operations in Europe and Pacific altogether different, and so I never really. And as far as I was concerned, I think Ike was a great man. I mean, he was the best, as far as I'm concerned. You know, when you talk about MacArthur, you know, he didn't get along with President Truman at all. That was quite common knowledge, but MacArthur was, you know, he was known as I shall return. You know, that's always heard that about when he left the Philippines and went, and he said, I shall return. And he did. He came back. But like I say, he didn't get along with Truman, so I don't think he more or less was kind of disappeared for us. You never heard much about, with Ike, of course, you know, he became our president, so it's altogether different.
Okay. One more question about Eisenhower is, how do you feel like, what type of leadership did he
And leader
portray?
Ike.
Correct.
Well, I'm sure you can't fault Ike. He was a great leader. I have no doubt about that. I think everybody felt that way about him. He had an awful lot to do, because that covered an awful lot of territory, and so many troops, and so much, and he had so many different, General Montgomery, and I can't think of the other general that went up through up through Europe. You probably know the name. He was a general that they couldn't hold him back. He was, huh?
Was it George Patton by any chance?
Who?
George Patton?
Yes, that's the man. Patton was he was a very, he was a good man, a good general, and he wanted to go a lot faster than what Ike did, because Ike and Montgomery they get along. I think they were quite close. They'd done a lot of decisions together, and Patton was in a hurry, and he wanted to get up to. You couldn't hold him back. He would have been in Berlin long before he got there if he had his way. That was common knowledge, and they had an awful time holding him back. But he was a kind of a little bit on the bluff order, and had some little get-tos, or whatever you want to call them, you probably read about him he got a little bit sassy with some young GI, with an ordinary GI. I mean, that was a common thing, knowledge. But as a whole, I think the troops thought he was great, and they had nothing but admiration for him. That I was not involved in myself enough to know that, but I read about Patton. He was a great general, no doubt about it. And Ike had so much. That was an awful big job what he had to do, and he had to make a lot of decisions that would involve a lot of guys getting killed, but he had to do it, and Normandy was a terrible thing. If you read the things that happened at Normandy, it was pretty bad. If you read some of the letters that I've read, seen, was written up the guys that were in it. It was a complete mess, really. Yeah. I mean, it never went according to plan. If you read it, it never went according to plan. Everything, the weather was horrible, and when they landed at the beaches, all them landing craft never got near to where they were supposed to. Right. And then the guys would, you probably see me. I've talked long enough.
Oh, no, that's okay.
Anyway, yeah, but that's what Normandy was a terrible thing. It accomplished the purpose.
Right.
They got in there and done just what they wanted to do, but it is an awful lot of lives lost. And like I said, it didn't go according to plan, but it finally got done. That
Right.
was the main thing. But like I said, Ike was considered a great man, and I think everybody thought that.
Yeah, I think so too.
Huh?
I think so too. I read that he's
Yes.
the one president that had both the
Yeah.
both parties supporting him. So
He had an awful lot of, it's awful hard to make a decision that he had to make, but he had to do it, and he did. Yeah.